Today we're here to promote the provisions of Senate File 234, which essentially seeks to invest $100 million into what has become a really highly successful border-to-border broadband grant program. Some of you may recall that back in 2013-14, the legislature created this program in cooperation with Governor Dayton, and in total, to date, the legislature has invested over $65 million into this program. These investments are important, we believe, because they have helped to extend connectivity to over 10,000 homes, 1,000 businesses, and 100 community anchor institutions all across Greater Minnesota. We believe, with the support of economic studies, that each $1 of taxpayer money that we invest into this program will return itself 10 times over in both direct and indirect economic activity. And that's why I feel so passionately about this particular issue. There are many self-explanatory reasons for Minnesotans to want quality, dependable broadband service, whether it be in their homes, businesses, schools, hospitals, resorts, or any other venue that you can imagine. The reason for the $100 million appropriation is because it aligns with the biennial investment recommendation of Governor Dayton's Broadband Task Force. Greater Minnesota Democrats strongly believe that quality broadband access today is very similar to the effort to provide electricity to Minnesotans many decades ago. This competitive and matching grant process alleviates situations where private investment capital is perhaps limited, yet we know that consumer demand is extremely strong. These public dollars will in turn generate other public investments, private investments, and will provide a return to Minnesota that exceeds the traditional GDP measurement with respect to basic quality of life. Minnesota has well over $1 billion of surplus. This is perhaps one of the most critical types of investments we can make with one-time monies. Our rural communities are screaming for help to maintain existing business, attract new and expanding business, keep people in their homes and on their family farms. It is an enhancement to education and healthcare industries, and it helps move us closer to having Minnesota be a national leader in access to high-quality broadband. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Sandstead for some comments from the House perspective. She's the chief author of the House version of this bill. Thank you.
Good morning. I am very honored and privileged to carry the House companion on this bill. As a representative of District 6A, it's something I'm very excited to do. I come from a district that pretty much exists and its economy is almost wholly dependent on mining. And mining is one of those things that's extremely cyclical. And as I ran my campaign, I promised to work towards diversification in the economy. This bill is exactly what we need on the Iron Range to do that. In order to diversify our economy, we need effective, quality broadband services to bring in the businesses that we need. Obviously, our schools need it as part of their education services, and I really think that if Minnesota is going to be kind of a destination location for businesses, this broadband service will be exactly what we need to draw other businesses in. And I'm very excited about this, and it's a privilege to carry the companion bill.
Good morning. My name is Mark Erickson. I'm the EDA director in the city of Winthrop. We're one of 10 communities in Sibley and Renville County, as well as 17 townships who have put their tax dollars on the line to build a fiber network. And we know that it's going to drive our economy down there forward. If the state can find its way to invest these dollars in a broadband grant program, it will touch every metric that the legislature is charged with monitoring, from education to healthcare to transportation to advanced manufacturing to jobs growth to economic development. Broadband, ultra-high-speed fiber broadband in the state of Minnesota is a game changer. It's a transformative, innovative technology that will allow all of us to grow our opportunities here. I come from Sibley County. It's a conservative county. It went pretty strongly toward President Trump. And I will tell you today that every one of those townships and every one of those conservative councils in our area voted almost unanimously to put their tax dollars on the line to build these fiber networks. The reason that we need these grant funds is to stimulate and to incentivize the providers to build these networks. Public-private partnerships are a key to growing this opportunity. The business model that the incumbents have today does not allow them to make the high-cost investment in rural fiber networks. Without any incentivizing, without any funds, they will not be able to do that. And that will mean that all of us are left behind in rural Minnesota. So I encourage this bill. I wish there was more dollars to put into it, but I applaud the Senate and the House of Representatives, the Democratic Party, for their vision to put forward this bill. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nick Frentz, Senator from District 19. I live in North Mankato and represent Mankato, North Mankato, and all of Nicollet County. This bill is a must for the growing of the economy in rural Minnesota. During the campaign, I heard stories about kids from rural areas who had to come into town to do their homework because of no internet access. This is the classic. Don't ask what it costs, ask what it pays. And I'm proud to be a co-author of this bill, and I look forward to working toward its passage. Thank you very much.
I'm David Tomasoni from Chisholm, same Senate district as Representative Sandsted and Representative Metza. My Senate district is 150 miles from corner to corner. I realize that when city slickers drive 150 miles north, they think they're really far north, but they still aren't up to my district. And so, but the population centers that I have are about 100 miles on a straight line, and they go from Marble to White Lakes. And many of you probably don't even know where Marble is, but that's in my district, and Marble's probably wired, and so is White Lakes. But all the areas up north and south of those areas are in rural Minnesota, are townships that probably aren't wired. And we've had some success in putting some broadband into these areas, and we've had 2 or 3 big projects that are making a big difference, because they're places like the Big Fork Hospital doesn't have as much ability to use high-speed internet as it would like, and it's a very, very rural hospital, but it's a very, very beautiful and very, very good hospital. And you've heard about people with the kids coming home from school with their iPads not being able to access the internet, or people who want to start a business in rural Minnesota and not being able to do it because of the fact that the access is not there. So while all of the jobs are being created from the St. Cloud to Rochester corridor, what we want to be able to do is be able to compete on a level playing field with our broadband and be able to say, look, we know that you can do these types of jobs anywhere. It's a matter of whether or not you have connectivity. And the thing that we want to get now is connectivity. And little by little, it's happening. 100 million won't do the job. It's even more than that. But it's a really, really good start. And the 65 million or so that we put in the last couple of years is making a big dent. And there's some federal money coming in, and then there's private partners that are putting in money also. So everybody's participating, but we need to do more, and this is a good bill to do it. So thank you.
I'm Kent Eakin, and from District 4 up in northwest Minnesota. Moorhead and Detroit Lakes are the biggest population centers in my district. I come from Norman County, though, which is just to the north of there, and about over 60% of the people living up there don't have access to the basic 25 megabyte broadband services. And it's critically important to the development, economic development, and the retention of population. We've been losing people in that area. We need to hang on to our population and build on our population base. And broadband, high-speed broadband is absolutely essential to that effort. And I think back to a story that my dad told. Representative Simonson was talking about the importance of REA, the Rural Electric Association, for Greater Minnesota, and what a turning point that was for Greater Minnesota in improving the quality of life for the people in those areas. And I think back to a story that my dad told me, who grew up on a dairy farm that didn't have any electrification when he was young. But he remembered the day that electricity came to the farm, and he remembered being out in the barn with his father. They used to use lanterns before they had the electricity, and said that the light was very dim. And he remembered when the lights came in, how bright everything was in the barn, and he told the story about how he was standing by the door after the chores, waiting for his dad to come to the door, and they'd always walk back to the house together. While he was standing there, his dad came walking past him and walked towards this post where the old lantern used to hang. And he knew that he was doing it by force of habit, and he reached up to grab the lantern, and it wasn't there. And he laughed at him, and his dad had kind of a sheepish grin on his face and walked back to the door and shut off the lights, and they walked back to the house together under the brightness of the light from the bulb on the pole in the middle of the yard. And he told that story because of what an impression it made on him and what an impact it had on the quality of life for people in greater Minnesota. And these broadband services have the potential to have the same impact or even greater impact on the lives of people in greater Minnesota and on the quality of life for Minnesotans generally, because we all do good together. I mean, the metro area, the more populated centers of the state, they can't hope to remain successful on their own or be islands of prosperity in a sea of economic decline. We need all of Minnesota to thrive economically, and this is a critical piece of that. So thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Jason Metza from District 6B in Virginia, and got to say this has been a long process so far. We've got a lot of promises made on the campaign over the last few years, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. We've heard a lot of good comments of why our communities need something like this, the dire need on both sides of the aisle. And I'm just asking voters to hold us accountable. When people run on things and say we're going to make investments on things, and it seems like we all agree on what those investments should be, make sure you're calling us to keep us accountable. I'll leave it at that, and thank you for taking the time today to come down and hear our pitch on this good bill that my two wonderful colleagues are carrying here.
All right, so with that, I'd open it up if there's any questions. Otherwise, we'll all be available, I'm sure, afterwards for questions too. That's an absolutely perfect question to ask. And I think if you go back to 13 and 14, when we started talking about putting this program together, that was the kind of the burning question on a lot of people's minds. And if you look at the language of the law, first of all, these grants are 50-50 matches, right? So this requires 50% state funds and 50% of funds to come from somewhere else, oftentimes private investments. And we want to make sure that as we're expending public dollars, we're expending dollars into a system that is designed to last into the foreseeable future. And you're right, this is one of the areas where technology changes nearly every day. But if you look at the language of the law as it sits right now, that these grant dollars can only be expended on middle mile infrastructure, and it has to be infrastructure that's scalable to 100 megs up and 100 megs down. And that is not something that we anticipate exceeding anytime in the near future. So essentially, it's hard infrastructure, and it has to be scalable to accommodate those types of speeds, which is well beyond any projected speed goals into the foreseeable future. Right. True.
There have been, as you can see, some initial resistance from Republicans. How can you hope to get another even greater than Governor Martin?
Right, and we want to commend the governor, first of all, for proposing to invest $60 million. That's more than he's proposed in the past, and it's just a sign that there's more and more discussion happening around this topic all across Minnesota. But I would say that to folks that are reluctant to make these investments, that a couple of things. A, we have about a $1.5 billion surplus. If you're looking for opportunities to spend one-time monies on things that return themselves 10 times over, this is the place to do it. I would also suggest that wherever you go in greater Minnesota, and we are, generally spoiled here in the Twin Cities and my city of Duluth and other populated areas, but anywhere you go in greater Minnesota, whether it be Republican or Democratic district, people are looking for access to quality broadband. And I think it's a good expenditure, and we shouldn't get twisted up in, whether we should spend or shouldn't spend. This is an area where we can support economic development in all districts across the state.
The actual cabling, the fiber optic is a certain one. It's very expensive.
I think it's important to remember, based on the previous question, what the premise of this grant program is for. This is about middle mile infrastructure. It's not about, what the provider does at their base station, and it's not about what the recipient of the service does in their home or on their property. This is about the middle mile infrastructure. And the law is specifically designed not to dictate what type of technology to use, simply that it has to be scalable. And if the day comes where we can accomplish that with wireless technology, wonderful, right? I mean, nobody's going to complain about that. Right now, we're not there yet with technology, so we're looking for technology that is scalable, and that's what meets the criteria of the law.
About the state's money, typical thing, the state's money should go to only unserved people, not underserved people. Where does this bill come down on that? What would you say about that?
Right, and that's a very friendly debate that we have just about every year about unserved versus underserved, and both arguments have merit, quite frankly, but this bill doesn't change any of the policy that's in current law. This is simply a funding mechanism. So under current law, a portion of the funds are dedicated to unserved, a portion of the funds are dedicated to underserved. We recognize that as we go forward and build out more sections of the state, that what will remain is the most difficult sections to build out. But obviously, there's, intent to serve as many people as we can, but our goals in statute are to cover the state of Minnesota in its entirety, border to border. So we'll get there, and we'll focus on both those areas at the same time.
Based on what you said, what more directly is your message to private providers who may be listening to this and say, well, this is competition in the state?
It's not necessarily competition. This is designed to be a cooperation. We want to partner with private providers. We want to partner with any provider that's willing to step up. This is about, if the demand was out there and the return on investment was what it is like here in the metro area, we wouldn't be talking about this. The entire state of Minnesota would be built out. But this is about Minnesota taxpayers stepping up and providing some additional support for those private providers to build out their systems. We're not building a public system necessarily with these dollars. We're supporting them and leveraging the private investments to help them get their work accomplished. And we're doing that because Minnesotans are begging for this, right? I mean, this is the wave of right now. It's not even the wave of the future anymore. This is the right now. This is the need. And when you go to rural Minnesota and you talk about what's going to keep you in your homes and on your farms and in your businesses, this is what they want.